Welcome to module number one, your entrepreneurial DNA. So, the number one thing you need in order to separate yourself from among the rest is to be original. Notice I'm not saying to become original, I'm saying be original. And that simply means this: whatever you think you need, you've already got it. So, be your authentic self, remain true to your identity. So, I want you to think about DNA for just a moment. DNA is a molecule that is the genetic code for all living organisms. So it's kind of like your genetic fingerprint, and it is completely and utterly 100% unique. Now, we're not going to turn this into a science lesson, but I think we can agree on the implications that came as a result of the discovery of DNA. If your DNA is unique to you, despite the 7 billion people on Earth, then no one can duplicate who you are and what you can do. In fact, science has proven that even identical twins have distinct DNA and each possess individuality. So, Adriana, can you please tell us how this is relevant to us as entrepreneurs?
Sadly, most new entrepreneurs want to get started by being exactly like their mentor or someone they look up to. Now, don't get me wrong, we need leaders to learn from and to be inspired. It's great to want to accomplish the same things they have, but we cannot expect to take the exact same road as they have taken. We can only accomplish what they have accomplished, but we cannot be who they are. Well, like we discussed, the network marketing industry is full of people who are trying to be just like someone else. You need to make sure you're careful not to cross that fine line. By all means, learn from your mentors, but strive to emulate them, not to imitate them. Let's examine the difference, and this is from Google definitions. To emulate, to match or surpass a person of achievement, typically by imitation.
But not necessarily.
Now, to reproduce the function or action of. Now, for imitation, is to copy a person's speech or mannerism, especially for comic effect.
That's actually very interesting. That's exactly what comedians do. They do imitations.
That's right. Now, to copy or simulate.
Yeah, when I hear this word simulation or simulate, I think about simulations, things like combat or flight simulations that they're intended to look like the real thing, but they're actually not. They're fake. So the problem isn't when you want to be just like your role model, it's when you actually want to be your role model. That's when things can go wrong for you. And why? Well, there's actually several reasons. Number one, you don't possess the same DNA as they do, like their skills, their knowledge, personality. Secondly, your circumstances are different. There's a lot of variables like time, place, situation. Um, they'll naturally cause you to achieve different results than they have. When you imitate, deliverability will also be unnatural. You will not feel like yourself. That's kind of what we were talking about with comedians doing imitations. And finally, people will take notice and it will be completely obvious that you're just mimicking someone else.
But Jose, some people might say, well, my mentor has had so much success with this one thing that he or she does, and I just want to do the exact same thing. What would you say to those people?
Well, there just happens to be a very simple solution to this problem, which is this: you give credit where credit is due. So when you're sharing something that you've learned from a mentor, tell it in the form of a story, how and where you learned it. Spread the wisdom, then provide kind of like a testimonial about how this helped you achieve better results in, XYZ. Don't be a plagiarist, okay? Respect people's intellectual property.
Great. So let's conclude this module by explaining the difference between duplicate and replicate. Jose, would you explain these for us, please?
My pleasure. So duplicate, again, these are Webster's dictionary definitions. It says exactly like something else, especially through having been copied. It's funny because I actually remember filing government documents for our kids, things like birth certificates or immigration documents, where original documents were mandatory. Copies were not accepted. And that's because they literally had to see the ink on the paper. So it's very interesting. Duplicate also means having two corresponding or identical parts. And finally, it means to make or be an exact copy of. So ask yourself this, as an entrepreneur, does this sound like something you want to do? Do you want to be an exact copy of someone else? Probably not. So let's move on to replicate, which initially sounds like the exact same thing, but it's a little different. Replicates means to make an exact copy of or to reproduce. It means of the nature of a copy. It also means a close or exact copy, a replica. Now I'm going to give you a little example because I am a musician, and there's a term in music called an octave, which is basically referring to two notes that are the same, and I've illustrated them here in the diagram. It's the same note. There's a middle C and there's a high C. Now when you're playing in music, it's called unison. You have two notes they have the same name, it's the same sound, but what's different is the pitch. So this is kind of like what you would want to be able to do, play a variety of. When you look at the piano there on the bottom, you can actually see that even though there's only 12 different notes that exist, they are basically replicated 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 times over the piano, because you can get distinct pitches copying the same thing, but it's not 100% identical. It's just a replica. So take note of how closely defined these two are. Clearly there's a unique advantage in being able to replicate something, in that it takes the primary characteristics of the original concept, but it also adds its own unique element to the mix. So that makes it both equal and unique. So that's pretty cool. I can't stress enough that as entrepreneurs, you need to emulate and replicate. So be sure to model your success after someone you admire, but don't make the mistake of comparing yourself to them. Often people will feel like they don't measure up to their role models, but it's because they're unique. They're the true original, just like you are. So be sure to set yourself apart from all the followers out there and become a leader. So how do you do this exactly? You begin by tapping into your entrepreneurial DNA and bringing forth the greatness that's already in you. Sometimes originality is spontaneous, and sometimes it needs to be triggered by something, but we all have the ability to be creative and unique. I keep thinking of that scene in the movie Hitch where Will Smith's character goes up to a beautiful young woman at the bar, and she's surrounded by men that are trying to pick her up. So he approaches her very nonchalant, and when he addresses her, he's kind of rude and he actually offends the girl. But then he turns his back and he walks away while she follows after him in total disdain. But little does she know that Hitch actually offended her on purpose in order to get her attention, focused on him and away from this other circle of guys. So the scene basically ends with the woman smiling and she's all flattered. And now think about that. You have the ability to do the exact same thing as an entrepreneur, because you're also competing against quote unquote other guys, and you have to be original in order to get your prospects' attention. Things like skills, education, training, those can all be learned by just reading. So we're talking beyond all that. Creativity comes from the imagination, and it only comes to fruition by experience and implementation. So in the next module, we're going to talk about the part of your DNA that will truly enable you to succeed in your business. And this is something that cannot be learned or acquired in any marketing course or any ebook, because it simply cannot be taught.